There is a peculiar silence that follows when a person, a group, or even an entire community vanishes without a trace. It is a silence that echoes louder than sound, a lingering absence that breeds speculation, fear, and folklore. History is littered with names that should have remained ordinary, but instead became immortal because they disappeared. They left no closure, only questions, and these questions keep us awake at night, turning mysteries into legends. 1971, a man boarded a commercial plane in Portland, Oregon. He called himself Dan Cooper, though the world would later know him by another name, D.B. Cooper. He was not extraordinary in appearance, just another middle-aged passenger in a dark suit. Yet within hours, he pulled off one of the boldest acts in aviation history. He handed a note to the flight attendant, claiming he had a bomb, and demanded $200,000, 4 parachutes, and a refueling truck. His requests were met, the passengers released, and the plane took off again under his control. Somewhere over the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest, he jumped into the darkness carrying the ransom. Neither he nor the money was ever seen again. Search teams combed the forests, the rivers, and the mountains, but no conclusive trace emerged. Some said he died on impact, swallowed by the wilderness. Others insist he survived, perhaps blending into society, living quietly with his secret. D.B. Cooper became more than a hijacker. He became a myth, the man who defied the system and then dissolved into thin air. Decades earlier, another figure vanished into legend, though her story was shaped not by crime, but by ambition. Amelia Earhart, one of the most celebrated aviators in the world, set out in 1937 to circle the globe. Her journey captivated millions, a woman defying the limits of her time and pushing the boundaries of aviation. But somewhere, over the Pacific Ocean, near Howland Island, her radio went silent. Neither her nor her plane was ever recovered. The ocean offered no answers. Some say her plane crashed and sank, the waves burying her forever. Others believe she survived, perhaps stranded on an island, perhaps even captured during the rising tensions of war. Rumors suggested she lived under a new identity. Others that skeletal remains found on distant islands may have been hers, but without definitive proof, Amelia remains a symbol of humanity's hunger for discovery and the cruel cost of venturing too far into the unknown. In the frozen Ural Mountains of Russia, 1959, 9 experienced hikers set out for an expedition that should have been routine for them. Instead, it became one of the most disturbing mysteries of the 20th century. When search teams arrived, they found the hikers' tent slashed open from the inside. Belongings were left behind as if they had fled in sudden terror. Bodies were scattered across the snow, some with broken bones, fractured skulls, or missing eyes. A few showed traces of radiation. Theories poured in: an avalanche, secret military testing, UFOs, or clandestine government experiments. None explained the bizarre injuries or the desperation etched into the scene. Vanish, leaving behind abandoned homes, tools, and questions. In 1587, over 100 English settlers established the Roanoke colony on the coast of what is now North Carolina. When supply ships returned years later, they found the settlement deserted. The only clue was the word, Croat, carved into a tree. Did they join nearby tribes? Were they lost to disease, famine, or violence? Or was there something stranger, a force history cannot explain? Roanoke became America's oldest unsolved disappearance, a legend woven into the country's identity. Other stories tell of villages and towns where people seemed to vanish overnight. In Brazil, early in the 20th century, an entire town called João Verde was said to have emptied suddenly, leaving homes intact, meals half prepared, and a school blackboard marked with an ominous phrase, "There is no salvation." Skeptics argue these are myths exaggerated over time, but the imagery is haunting. An entire community erased in silence is far more unsettling than one person lost to the wilderness. Not all vanishings are rooted in history's archives. Some come from the blurred edges of urban legend. Tales of vanishing hitchhikers, passengers who enter cars only to disappear mid-journey, have spread across cultures for decades. Sometimes the hitchhiker is later identified as someone long dead. These stories may be folklore, but they persist because they tap into our unease with strangers, the uncanny presence that lingers when the living and the dead seem to overlap. There are those who vanish and leave behind cryptic fragments, as though trying to communicate one last puzzle. In 1948, a man was found dead on Somerton Beach in Australia. No one could identify him. In his pocket was a torn scrap of paper with the words "Tamam Shud," meaning "it is finished," from a book of Persian poetry. Inside the book were strange codes that have never been fully deciphered. The Somerton man became less a corpse and more a question written across time. Similarly, missing hikers sometimes left diaries filled with fragmented entries, as though their final words were more riddle than revelation. Such clues keep hope alive, but they rarely provide answers. Shadowy hands are often suspected in disappearances. Governments accused of silencing whistleblowers, cults accused of leading their followers to vanish in secrecy. History has seen entire groups drawn into the orbit of charismatic leaders, only to disappear into hidden compounds or rituals that end in silence. Sometimes it is easier to believe in conspiracies than to accept randomness. If someone disappears, perhaps someone wanted it that way. At the heart of these stories lies psychology. Why do disappearances captivate us so powerfully? Because they represent stories without endings. The human mind craves closure, but vanishings deny it. They remind us of our fragility, our lack of control, our fear that life can simply unravel without explanation. And so we fill the silence with theories, stories, and legends. D.B. Cooper becomes a folk hero, Amelia Earhart, a timeless symbol, the Dyatlov hikers, martyrs of an unspoken truth. We transform the vanished into something larger than themselves because we cannot bear to let them simply fade away. In the end, the vanished never truly disappear. They remain in whispers, in folklore, in the endless speculation that keeps their presence alive. They remind us that the world is not fully mapped, not fully explained, and that in the shadows of history there will always be space for mystery. The world has always had a way of swallowing people whole. Sometimes it happens in the depths of the ocean, sometimes in the shadows of mountains, and sometimes in places so ordinary that their vanishing feels like a tear in reality itself. The stories pile up, layered with half-truths, speculation, and fear, until the disappearances themselves no longer belong to the people who lived them, but to the imaginations of everyone left behind. Consider the Bermuda Triangle, the vast stretch of ocean between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. Ships and planes have reportedly disappeared here for decades, swallowed by storms, magnetic anomalies, or perhaps something more sinister. Entire crews vanished without distress calls. Airplanes reported strange compass malfunctions before vanishing from radar. While science offers explanations such as rogue waves or human error, the myth of the Bermuda Triangle endures because it thrives on the absence of certainty. If nature alone is responsible, why does the region feel cursed? Do the tales of sudden silence linger more powerfully than the rational explanations? Then there is the story of Flight 19, a squadron of 5 U.S. Navy bombers that disappeared during a training exercise in 1945. The planes reported compass issues before communication was lost. Rescue missions were dispatched, but even the search planes sent after them vanished. The Atlantic offered no answers, no wreckage sufficient to close the case. To this day, the fate of Flight 19 fuels theories about underwater bases, alien intervention, or secret government experiments. What makes the story powerful is not just the disappearance of machines, but of men-trained pilots, disciplined soldiers, reduced to ghosts on the ocean. Disappearances are not always marked by dramatic events. Some unfold quietly, almost invisibly. Every year, hikers, campers, and adventurers vanish in the wilderness. Some are explained by accidents, exposure, or wild animals, but others remain unsettlingly strange. Bodies are never recovered, personal belongings remain untouched, or survive odd circumstances. There are cases where search parties found shoes neatly placed beside a trail, food uneaten in backpacks, or footprints that stopped abruptly as though the earth itself swallowed the person whole. Such details push ordinary tragedies into the realm of legend. One of the strangest phenomena tied to missing persons is the idea of mass vanishings. In certain places, entire groups vanish as though removed in one sweep. The folklore of vanishing villages persists across cultures. A town where the fires still burned but the people were gone. A settlement where livestock remained but the herders had vanished. Schools where blackboards bore strange messages but no students or teachers remained. Even when these tales are exaggerated, their persistence reflects something deep in the human mind. The fear that security, community, and continuity can vanish overnight. Sometimes the disappearances leave behind details that feel staged, almost theatrical. A note scribbled in haste, a cryptogram etched into paper, or a single phrase carved into wood. These fragments invite endless interpretation. Was it a farewell, a warning, or nothing more than coincidence? The absence of clarity is what sustains the fascination. We cannot stop searching for meaning when faced with silence. The Somerton man remains one of the most haunting examples. His body was discovered on a beach in Australia, immaculately dressed, with no identification. In his pocket, a single scrap of paper bore the words, Tamam Shud. Copy of a rare book of poetry with coded markings, but no one could decipher their meaning. The man had no past, no family that could be identified, and no cause of death that satisfied science. He was erased from the world, leaving only the mystery of his presence. This same yearning for answers fuels conspiracies around famous disappearances. When someone vanishes, the simplest explanations, accident, misadventure, foul play, are rarely enough for the public. We crave larger forces at work. Become shadowy figures hiding truths from the masses. Cults become sinister groups capable of orchestrating vanishings on a scale that chills the imagination. Sometimes these theories are born from paranoia. Other times they are fueled by real secrecy, classified documents, or suspicious behavior by authorities. The line between truth and fear blurs until speculation becomes accepted as possibility. Psychologically, disappearances expose our deepest vulnerabilities. Human beings are wired for narrative. We need beginnings, middles, and ends. It denies closure. The missing person remains suspended in time, neither dead nor alive, neither found nor forgotten. This liminal state is unbearable, and so we invent explanations, fill the silence with stories, and transform the vanished into legends. For the families of the disappeared, this absence is torment. Hope flickers endlessly, often cruelly prolonged by false leads or fabricated sightings. Loved ones live in two worlds at once, one where the missing is dead and gone, and one where they might still walk through the door at any moment. For the broader culture, however, these disappearances feed into myth-making. The unknown becomes a stage on which we project fears of government corruption, supernatural forces, or human cruelty. Take the case of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 in 2014. A modern jetliner with over 200 passengers vanished mid-flight. In an age of satellites and constant communication, the idea that a plane could disappear seemed impossible. And yet, it did. Wreckage was scarce, explanations contradictory, and conspiracy theories immediate. Was it a mechanical failure, a deliberate act, or something hidden by global powers? The truth remains unresolved, and like all great disappearances, it refuses to give us closure. Disappearances also serve as cultural mirrors. D.B. Cooper became an outlaw folk hero because his crime reflected rebellion against authority and the audacity to vanish. Amelia Earhart became a symbol of courage, ambition, and the risk of mystery, forever frozen in a story that will never be fully told. Each case becomes larger than life, carrying meaning far beyond the fate of those who were lost. And then there are the vanishings that feel designed to taunt us, like puzzles set deliberately without solutions. Cryptic codes, half-finished messages, sudden silence in the middle of routine. They invite us into the middle of routine. They invite us into the mystery, but offer no resolution. Perhaps that is why we cannot let them go, because in some way they remind us of our own mortality, the fact that life itself is a vanishing act. The psychology of disappearance cuts both ways. For those left behind, it is grief without closure. For societies, it becomes a narrative space where fear, wonder, and imagination thrive. It reminds us that the world is not as controlled or mapped as we like to believe. There are gaps, shadows, and silences into which people, groups, and even entire towns can vanish. The vanished never truly leave us. They linger in our imaginations, in the stories retold across decades, in the endless theories that refuse to die. Every missing person becomes more than themselves. They become part of humanity's need to wrestle with the unknown. And as long as there are questions, the vanished remain present. The further one digs into the archives of disappearances, the more one realizes how fragile the boundary is between presence and absence. It takes only a moment, a wrong turn, a sudden storm, or a single decision for someone to step out of the known world and into oblivion. What haunts us is not merely the act of vanishing, but the traces left behind, the unfinished threads that demand resolution and never deliver it. Among the strangest threads that demand never. Of explorers who set out into the wilderness, armed with courage, skill, and provisions, only to dissolve into the landscape as if consumed by it. The Franklin expedition of 1845 is one of history's most haunting maritime vanishings. Two ships, the HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, sailed from England to chart the Northwest Passage. They never returned. For years, rumors circulated about what had become of them. Later expeditions found skeletal remains, signs of scurvy, and evidence of desperation. Some accounts even suggested cannibalism among the stranded crew. But the full story of what truly befell Franklin and his men remained elusive until the 21st century, when the wrecks of the ships were finally discovered in the icy waters of the Arctic. Even so, discovery did not bring complete clarity. It only confirmed the scale of the ordeal, while leaving the psychological torment of the lost crew forever beyond our grasp. Endless white, no horizon, no path. The polar night can consume entire expeditions, leaving behind nothing but abandoned camps, broken tools, and whispers in the wind. In such places, reality itself seems fragile. Men follow compasses into the void, only to be swallowed by the snow. Other explorers vanished under more mysterious circumstances. Percy Fawcett, the British adventurer, disappeared in 1925 while searching for a lost city he called Z in the Amazon rainforest. He was last seen heading into the jungle with a small team, determined to prove that ancient civilizations thrived in the depths of South America. Neither he nor his companions were ever found. Theories range from death by hostile tribes to illness or starvation. Some even believe Fawcett chose to vanish deliberately, perhaps to live out his life in a hidden community. Like so many before him, his disappearance elevated him into legend. The jungle became not just a physical place, but a metaphor for humanity's hunger for discovery and the danger of chasing dreams too far into the unknown. Disappearances do not always occur on grand expeditions. They happen in the mundane. Hikers leave for a weekend and never return. Children step outside and are never seen again. Urban landscapes, too, are filled with gaps where people simply fade from the records. Some vanishings can be explained by crime, accidents, or voluntary escape, but the sheer volume of the unexplained forces us to consider deeper possibilities. Consider the unsettling phenomenon of hikers found with clothing neatly folded, shoes placed beside trails, or campsites intact, but their occupants missing. Such details feel wrong, as if carefully staged. Searchers describe finding footprints that simply stop mid-path with no indication of direction afterward. Dogs lose the scent abruptly, as though the vanished were plucked from the earth. These cases fuel theories of abduction, alien encounters, or interdimensional rifts. But even without such speculation, the raw mystery gnaws at us. Why would a person remove clothing in the freezing cold? Why leave supplies untouched? Each unanswered question becomes a hook into our imagination. Entire towns have also been reduced to silence. Built during a mining boom, it was suddenly abandoned when the industry. While the cause is economic, the emotional impact is haunting. It reminds us how quickly human presence can vanish and how landscapes can devour communities without warning. Myths of mass vanishing speak even more directly to our fears. Villages abandoned with meals still warm, livestock unfed, doors unlocked, and tools mid-use. Sometimes the only evidence left behind is a phrase, written cryptically, as though meant to explain but only deepening the mystery. In Brazil, chills us not because it answers anything, but because it suggests that the missing knew something we did not. Theories range from cult activity to mass abductions, but no one can confirm them. The gap between possibility and certainty is the breeding ground of legend. Disappearances in folklore often blend with ghost stories. The vanishing hitchhiker is a tale told across continents. A driver picks up a passenger, often a young woman in distress, who suddenly disappears from the car. When the driver inquires later, he learns she has been dead for years. These stories blur the line between the living and the dead, reflecting a universal human fear that absence and presence may overlap, that the missing are not gone, but exist in a shadow world that sometimes brushes against our own. More unnerving are those who leave behind deliberate codes or cryptic writings. A missing person's diary filled with fragmented entries, phrases that hint at paranoia, voices, or secret pursuits. Cryptograms carved into wood or stone. The Somerton Man remains an example that has never loosened its grip on the public imagination. Who leaves behind a code with no key? Was he a spy? A lover driven to despair? A victim of poisoning or conspiracy? The lack of resolution forces us into endless speculation, which is why the story has survived for decades. The role of secrecy cannot be ignored. Governments have been accused of concealing information about vanishings. Witnesses to sensitive events sometimes vanish without explanation. Cults have orchestrated disappearances of members, convincing them to sever ties with society or leading them into fatal rituals. The overlap between secrecy, control, and disappearance is potent. When records vanish, when evidence is withheld, when explanations are vague, suspicion blooms. Every blank space in the official narrative becomes fertile ground for conspiracy. Psychologically, vanishings strike us because they fracture our sense of order. We expect death. We expect loss. But we expect them to come with cause and record. To vanish without explanation feels like defiance of the rules. It terrifies us because it suggests chaos lurking beneath the surface of everyday life. If someone can simply disappear, so can we. At the same time, disappearances become mirrors in which societies see themselves. D.B. Cooper reflected defiance and rebellion. Amelia Earhart embodied ambition and the cost of pushing boundaries. The Dyatlov hikers became symbols of the unknown forces, of nature and secrecy. Each vanishing becomes larger than life, reshaped into legend that tells us less about the individuals lost and more about the fears and desires of the living. This is why vanishings persist in culture long after their facts fade. They are not just unsolved cases, but mythologies in motion. They remind us that our world, mapped and measured as we believe it to be, still holds gaps into which lives can fall. And as long as those gaps exist, stories of the vanished will continue to haunt us. Disappearances have always revealed as much about the living as they do about the lost. When someone vanishes, those left behind create narratives, theories, and suspicions to fill the void. In this way, each disappearance is less a closed door than an open wound, one that society stitches with stories that often say more about our fears than about reality. Take, for instance, the enduring mystery of Amelia Earhart. Her attempt to circumnavigate the globe in 1937 ended when her plane disappeared over the Pacific. Decades of speculation followed. Perhaps she ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean. Perhaps she was captured by Japanese forces. Perhaps she survived on an uninhabited island. Each theory has its evidence, each explanation its gaps. What is clear is that Earhart was not just a pilot, but a cultural symbol of courage and independence. Her vanishing transformed her from pioneer to legend, an unfinished narrative that continues to inspire books, films, and research expeditions. Her disappearance is less about where she ended up and more about the unresolved tension between human ambition and the unforgiving vastness of the world. The Dyatlov Pass incident is another case that refuses to rest. In 1959, 9 hikers perished in the Ural Mountains under bizarre circumstances. Their tent was found slashed open from the inside, their belongings left behind, and their bodies scattered in the snow, some missing eyes or tongues, others showing signs of intense pressure trauma. Theories range from avalanche to secret military tests, from paranormal encounters to psychological breakdown. No explanation satisfies every detail. This is what keeps the story alive, the absence of closure. The hikers became not only victims, but protagonists of a real-life mystery story that audiences revisit again and again, each retelling reshaping the narrative into something larger than the event itself. Urban legends about vanishing hitchhikers, ghost passengers, and phantom travelers reflect how the theme of disappearance into the supernatural. These stories are not about specific people, but about archetypes. They tell us that some vanishings are eternal, that the boundary between presence and absence is porous. In this way, folklore provides both explanation and warning. To drive alone at night is to risk encountering not just the road, but the void. But not all vanishings are relegated to myth. Some occur in plain sight, under circumstances too strange to dismiss. In 1872, the Mary Celeste was found adrift in the Atlantic, intact but deserted. The crew had vanished without a trace, leaving behind personal belongings, cargo, and food. The lifeboat was missing, but no distress signals were found. Theories abound: piracy, mutiny, sea quakes, or sudden storms, but none fit perfectly. explosion, even Chernobyl all involved debates over what was known, who concealed it, and why. In vanishings, similar suspicions arise. Governments accused of hiding search results, suppressing documents, or steering narratives away from inconvenient truths. This secrecy magnifies the mystery. People are not content with official silence. They interpret it as evidence of deeper plots. The absence of transparency mirrors the absence of the missing, and the two fuse into one endless question mark. The phenomenon of mass vanishings is especially disturbing. Stories of entire groups, whether villages or expeditions, disappearing together strike at our social instincts. A single lost individual can be rationalized, but when dozens vanish in unison, explanations falter. The Roanoke colony, famously abandoned with only the word C-Ro-8-O-A carved into a post, remains one of the earliest American mysteries. The settlers vanished without a trace, leaving behind an inscription that has been debated for centuries. Theories range from integration with local tribes to annihilation by disease or violence, but the lack of definitive evidence has turned the colony into a myth of its own. Psychologists studying disappearances emphasize the human need for narrative closure. When closure is denied, the mind invents possibilities. Loved ones of the missing sometimes cling to improbable hopes, unable to accept death without a body. Others spiral into paranoia, seeing conspiracy in every official statement. The psychology of disappearance is not confined to the vanished, but radiates outward, reshaping families, communities, and even nations. A single disappearance can influence laws, inspire literature, and alter collective memory. The Somerton Man case illustrates how a disappearance can intersect with enigma. Found dead on an Australian beach in 1948, his identity was never confirmed. In his pocket was a scrap of paper with the words "Tamam Shud," meaning "it is finished," torn from a rare book of Persian poetry. The book itself contained a code that has never been definitively cracked. Though technically not a disappearance, but an unexplained death, the absence of identity functions in the same way. The man is lost, his story untold, and in that vacuum, theories multiply: spy, fugitive, rejected lover, or victim of an elaborate plot. The allure lies not in the body, but in the absence of meaning attached to it. Disappearances also challenge our perception of time. When someone vanishes, they are simultaneously alive and dead, present and absent. For the families, birthdays and anniversaries arrive with unbearable ambiguity. Do they mourn or wait? Do they preserve rooms, clothing, voices on old recordings? Psychologists note that ambiguous loss without certainty, is among the most traumatic experiences because it denies closure. It freezes grief into an eternal present. The missing occupy a liminal space not only in memory, but in existence itself. In exploring these stories, we confront the ultimate human anxiety, the fragility of presence. We live under the assumption of stability, but vanishings reveal the truth that precarious, easily disrupted, and often beyond explanation. The world is vast, and in its shadows, people can slip away. Whether swallowed by forests, consumed by oceans, hidden by secrecy, or erased by time, the missing remind us of the limits of our knowledge and control. Perhaps this is why stories of vanishings endure in culture and media. They are not just tales of the lost, but reflections of our deepest questions. What does it mean to be remembered? What happens when old traces of us are erased? To vanish is to defy history itself, to become a permanent absence, and in that absence, humanity finds both terror and fascination. Disappearances are not only mysteries of the past, but living questions of the present. Every year, thousands of people are reported missing worldwide. Some are found quickly, others resurface after years, and many are never seen again. Behind each statistic lies a human story, a life interrupted, and a network of others left searching for answers. The scale of the phenomenon forces us to confront the unsettling possibility that disappearance is not an anomaly, but a constant shadow of human existence. D.B. Cooper is one of the most iconic examples, his vanishing transforming into legend almost immediately. In 1971, he hijacked a plane, demanded ransom, and parachuted into the night with $200,000. Despite extensive searches, no definitive trace of him was ever found. Only fragments of the ransom money surfaced years later, buried near a riverbank. Cooper became a folk hero, the outlaw who defied the system and slipped away forever. His disappearance is a reminder that sometimes vanishing is not only possible, but carefully engineered. It demonstrates how the act itself can become more important than the person, elevating him from man to myth. But most vanishings are not deliberate acts of rebellion. They are tragedies, the result of chance, vulnerability, or violence. In forests, hikers stray off marked paths and never return. In deserts, travelers are swallowed by shifting sands. At sea, waves claim entire vessels in minutes. Each environment holds its own dangers, but the human mind, searching for meaning, often refuses to settle for accident alone. The unknown compels us to imagine alternatives, from conspiracies to the supernatural. Consider the Bermuda Triangle, a region in the Atlantic infamous for ships and planes vanishing without trace. Explanations range from unusual magnetic fields to methane gas eruptions to more fantastical ideas of portals and alien intervention. While many incidents in the Triangle can be attributed to storms, navigational errors, or mechanical failure, the persistence of the myth speaks to our need to impose mystery upon the ordinary. To say it was only weather feels insufficient when entire crews vanish, leaving behind no distress calls. The legend fills the silence. Disappearances also occur in the digital age, though in different forms. People vanish from online spaces, abandoning profiles, leaving unanswered messages, deleting entire presences as if erasing themselves from collective memory. Though less physical, this too creates unease. To vanish in a hyper-connected world feels almost impossible. And yet it happens. Families searching for missing loved ones often turn to social media for clues, only to encounter more questions than answers. The digital footprint can be both a lifeline and a labyrinth. The cultural impact of vanishings extends into literature, film, and art. Stories of lost explorers, ghost ships, and mysterious disappearances are retold endlessly, reshaped for each generation. They satisfy the human appetite for narrative, suspense, and unresolved tension. From novels like The Vanishing Persons, we return again and again to the theme, not in search of resolution, but because the absence itself compels us. What makes disappearance uniquely terrifying is its defiance of narrative closure. Death, while tragic, offers finality. Disappearance leaves only possibility, a spectrum of outcomes that never collapses into certainty. For those left behind, this limbo becomes unbearable. Some never stop searching, others construct elaborate theories to make sense of the senseless. But in speculation, inhabiting the gray space between existence and non-existence, this ambiguity extends into law and governance. Declaring someone legally dead without a body is fraught with complexity. Insurance claims, inheritances, marriages, all are thrown into uncertainty by absence. The law demands finality by absence. The law demands finality, but disappearance denies it. In this way, the missing challenge not only emotional stability, but institutional structures built on certainty. Be swallowed by the vastness of the world. Every culture has stories of the missing, from children taken by spirits to travelers led astray by trickster forces. These myths are reflections of real dangers, wild animals, natural hazards, hostile groups. but they also speak to something deeper, the fear that reality itself can fail us, that we can step off the path and into nothingness. At times, vanishings become cautionary tales, warnings to respect nature, authority, or societal norms. At other times, they are celebrated as symbols of freedom, defiance, or mystery. D.B. Cooper's legend, Amelia Earhart's heroism, and Percy Fawcett's obsession all live on, not because of how they lived, but because of how they vanished. Their absence gives them a kind of immortality. In the end, what vanishings reveal is not merely the fragility of individual lives, but the vastness of the unknown. We live in a mapped, monitored, and measured world, yet people still slip through its cracks. Forests remain deep, oceans remain wide, skies remain endless, and human ambition still pushes into the places where control falters. Each disappearance reminds us that mystery has not been erased from the world. It persists in the silence left behind by those who are gone. And perhaps that is why these stories endure. They are not only puzzles to be solved, but reflections of the human condition. To vanish is to leave behind not answers, but questions, and in those questions, we glimpse the edges of our understanding. The missing are not merely gone, they are reminders that we too are fragile, that the world still holds shadows into which any of us might step, never to return.